Forced to work from home by your employer? Laid off or feeling depressed at home? Do you want to make money working from anywhere? We'll show you how to do it from your couch. It's time for another episode of the Work From Home Show. Coming to you from their homes in Austin, Texas and Tampa, Florida, here are your hosts, Adam and Naresh.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Work From Home Show. Shout out to all our homies, homeboys, homegirls, home trans, all the work from homers out there. I'm Naresh Vissa. It's a new year with Adam Schrader, and we are back. Howdy, and we are back for season 5. Can you believe it, Adam?
Whew, been a long ride.
It sounds crazy.
Long ride.
It sounds really crazy when you say season 5 because that's a lot of seasons. But at the same time, you saw the stats. They're still pretty strong. And like I announced on our last episodes, episode 52, season 4, this is our second to last season. So that's kind of sad, but at least our second to last full season.
Then we'll just be sporadic. We'll be the people who randomly pop into your lives.
We thank you all for continuing to listen to us and for the feedback. hello@workfromhomeshow.com. That's hello@workfromhomeshow.com. Adam, let's talk about 2024. We started our first season in 2020, which was an election year. This is an election year. 2020, we saw remote work ubiquitous worldwide. Let's have a quick rundown of your predictions for 2024, maybe as far as remote work and work from home goes, as well as you personally, and anything else that you want to share about 2024.
I think remote work is what it is at this point. I think companies have made up their minds about it, and it's going to be the way it's going to be for a substantial amount of time. So the areas that already have if they have remote laws in place, or not laws, but if companies have their remote policies in place and they're seeing people move, they've seen them move and they're not going to be stopping them. They don't really care. So, I don't foresee any big shifts one way or another. I think employees have found that what they've enjoyed, and the companies have either succumbed to that or employees have left, and there's just going to be the way it's going to be from moving forward. I think it was a good shift. It didn't go as far as I thought it might, but definitely moved the needle forward. Minimum 10 years, I think, from where we were pre-COVID.
It absolutely, big shift in 2020 accelerated it for the better. There are still employers, and I say still employers in that I think it's a minority now. I'd have to look up I remember reading the statistics somewhere, but it's not more than 50% of the employers who've said, hey, come back into the office. It's more like 40%, which is still pretty big, but that's a minority. And that's a big shift that we saw in 2020. One thing that I do want to talk about, which we touched on in the last episode of last season, 2023, is the layoffs that have been happening, artificial intelligence. I brought up how I use artificial intelligence on this show, and you made a comment saying, well, if it's accurate, then great. And it is. It's 99.9. It's crazy how super accurate. It can hear words that sometimes I can't even hear. Like if we're talking over each other, it hears it, and it's perfect. It's 99% accurate. Perfect grammar. The transcripts are perfect. And like I said, it costs like $50 a month for unlimited episodes. Or I think it's one episode a week, something like that. But artificial intelligence, you mix that in with these layoffs that have been happening. The layoffs aren't bad enough like we saw in 2020 to where we have a recession. But the layoffs are definitely there. And I feel like the high interest rate environment, it's looking like interest rates, or the Fed's going to keep interest rates high for maybe not the whole year, but for 4 or 5, maybe 6 months. And as long as, even if they start cutting, the interest rates are still if we look at a moving average over the last 30 years, they're still relatively high. Maybe not as high as like the 1980s or the 1970s, but
I think we can say that we're far enough away from that they don't count.
yeah, but for our generation, we consider this to be ultra high interest rate environment. If you're a millennial or Gen Z, this is ultra high. So what does all this mean for remote work? I think it's still smart to go remote. You have to remember, and we may not even remember this, but you and I are very productive from home. We've been doing it for such a long time. That's how we started this show. But most people, surprisingly, are not. They just screw around at home. They're not getting their job done, their deliverables done. And that's what's caused all these layoffs to happen. The people getting laid off are not highly productive workers. They're the ones who abuse the work from home system.
Who need to be back in office?
Well, the company may have said, well, we don't want an office anymore. We want to continue to be. In fact, many of these tech companies are fully remote, and they're just waiting for their leases to expire. And this has been their excuse to get rid of, to do the layoffs. It's, oh, this guy's only working 1 hour a day or 2 hours a day. Let's get rid of them because the interest rates, our debt, we have to service our debt, which the interest rates are a lot higher, and this is going to cut that cost. I do think the big corporations like the Wall Street banks are going to ask people to come back in because that's part of their brand. It's, oh, look at our nice big office on Park Avenue. Companies like that, the big brands, are going to ask people to come back into the office. That 40% number or so, I think, is going to jump up to the majority by the time we get to 2026. That's what I think.
Really? You think we're going to get a 10% bump in next, 2 years?
Yeah, I do. As more of these layoffs happen and as leases, commercial real estate, I'm sure you're following the commercial real estate space and what's going on there. I do think that there will be less office space. So I think, well, by the end of 2026, I could see it being like 60%, that number going from 40 to 60%. Yeah, I could see it end of 2026. So we're still almost 2 years away or a year and a half away from that.
Man, you're way more bullish than me. All right. Fair enough. I just think the people being laid off right now and the people who generally get laid off if times go, I mean, I've seen some things saying we're going to experience a slowdown and recession in 2024, which, if we do or not, whatever. But usually the people who get laid off aren't the people doing remote working whenever things really slow down. And so I don't know. I don't see that big of a bump happening, but hey,
well,
I've been wrong before in my life.
60%, if we do the math, that's 3 out of 5. So we're not talking about like cashiers or waiters, obviously. I think we're still a ways away from truck drivers and those types of jobs being replaced. My prediction for those is more like 2030 or so, where we'll start seeing humans being replaced by actual robots in those areas, self-driving, autonomous vehicles, drones, etc. But 3 out of 5, let's just say corporate worker, I'll consider you to be a corporate worker, me to be a corporate worker. 3 out of 5 by the end of 2026 will be fully remote. Not even a hybrid, not even a come into the office for 1 day a week.
Interesting. All right. I could see it happening, but I'm not as bullish as you on that actually happening.
So you're still bullish on the office space?
I mean, I think there's going to be a lot of downsizing as companies, in their leases and are able to downsize. But I just, like I said, I think companies, the bosses who like having people in the office or whose employees have shown that maybe they're not the most productive in office, I don't think that part's going to change, because I think the people who made the decisions that you're going to be in office are going to be around for several more years at a minimum.
I haven't heard you talk much about AI. Have you seen AI much in what you do?
The only AI that really is like stats. Some people have used them for podcasts and stuff, but I haven't seen much of it in my world. I don't know if you have. I mean, I know we're in very similar industries for part of our jobs. I haven't seen much AI on that front. I mean, some people use them for like blog posts and stuff, but I haven't seen that done. But you still kind of need an editor for those a little bit, even if it's just a quick read over, because I know you say it's gotten better, but we're not at the point where you can just tell it to write an article and then send it in and be like, yep, that's good. That's definitely good enough. Yeah.
I think 2023 actually was a year where AI, it was 2013 when crypto hit the map. It was the first time people had ever heard of Bitcoin, even though it had been around in 2009, 2010. 2023 is when it went mainstream, at least within that industry. And I feel like 2023 was that year for artificial intelligence. And we saw that with some of these AI companies. Look up the AI stock. That's the ticker symbol, AI. Most of these tech companies are stocks. The NASDAQ did really well in 2023 because if a tech company said, oh, yeah, we're going to do AI, we're going to implement AI, we're working on this AI thing, no one even knew what it was, its stock would just skyrocket. And a good example was NVIDIA. And many of these semiconductor companies started following the lead. And so I felt like 2023 was like the 2013 year for crypto. It was really the hype year. And then 2017 for crypto was the holy smokes, this is actually being integrated. There's actually an ecosystem around this. All these random crypto companies, their valuations went out the roof. Bitcoin just skyrocketed. And then again in 2021. So basically every 4 years, crypto has done something and it's made huge steps forward. So that's what I feel about AI. 2023 was AI's 2013 crypto year. I think there's no doubt by 2030, easily, AI is going to be not just autonomous vehicles, podcasts being done by robots and waiters it's like everything from your job, my job, our work. We're going to have to learn how to use these AI tools. You're not going to have a problem doing it, but many of these people who don't know technology that well, they're not going to make it. That's my prediction and my outlook. I'd just recommend you and our listeners to listen to that ChatGPT episode that we did a few months ago. That was actually one of our best performing episodes of 2023. The expert we had, Mike Wolford, he knew his stuff. And I went back to that episode, listened to it, and used some of the tools that he talked about. And I was like, whoa. I tried using it for my job, and I just felt like, oh, I could do this better. But I felt I was kind of biased too, because I prefer to do the work myself. But most people are going to not prefer to do the work themselves and just outsource it to AI.
It's possible. I don't see the same thing.
And I know some people like in medicine and healthcare, I've talked to many people and they're like, yeah, AI is a fad. It's never going to replace the doctors or even the techs or the nurse practitioners, or just like, it's not going to happen. There's too much in the healthcare space, too many moving parts. AI is not going to be a part of it. And I was like, oh, okay, we'll see. It makes sense to implement it.
How would it be implemented in like I get in terms of like real estate in the industry I'm thinking about, there's a lot of tools for like coming up with valuations and doing this, that, and the other. But in terms of actual, like, let's just say sales related jobs, do you really think AI or robots are going to take that over?
What's happened in 2023 is
like your soft skills.
I was going to say the soft skill jobs are the ones that got cut in 2023. I would say most of the people who have reached out to me in tech, they did tech sales or they did product management. So they like managed a product. And instead of having like 4 different product managers on one product, they had one. So that'll be like what you do, right? Like your product is selling like real estate online, and you guys do have like 4 or 5 different, we could call them product managers or salespeople. Well, instead of having 4 or 5 of them, these companies just went down to 1. So imagine like your company saying, oh, we don't need the other 3 or 4. We're just going to have 1. That's what ended up happening. A major reason for that is because they were able to automate the sales process. How did they automate the sales process? A lot of it just had to do with branding, for example. Like, does Microsoft need all these salespeople to sell like Microsoft Office? I'm just giving an example, not that Microsoft, I'm sure they did. The marketing has changed from having a sales guy going proverbially door to door to, hey, we're just going to come out with this like TikTok video or this YouTube video or do SEO or pay-per-click or whatnot, because it's tech sales. It's not door to door sales anymore.
Yeah. Okay. I can bite with that, but yeah, I think there's still definitely some sales jobs and stuff that are going to be they're going to require more stuff.
I think the cream is always going to so if you're good at what you do, let's say there are 4 salespeople at your company or 5, like the one guy who's really good or girl who's really good, they're going to keep their jobs. But the others, they might be good but not great. Well, we could implement AI, and we don't even know the AI tools, right? Like I keep saying AI, we don't even know how it would be implemented, but I'm sure there are some softwares and technologies that your company has implemented that you didn't expect them to implement 3 years ago when you joined.
I can definitely see that.
We'll see. This is something to monitor. We'll have some more episodes on it. One quick thing, last season, I did mention our highest rated episode was Marching to World War III. I actually thought about not even publishing that episode because it was pretty controversial, but it ended up doing really, really well. And it was really educational. So if you want to listen to that, you can look up Marching to World War III. Adam, let's talk quickly about non-competes, and then we'll call it an episode. Because this is important. This is really important. And it's a question I get a lot from friends, even family members, spouse, because you sign an offer letter with a company or you sign a contract and they have this non-compete section. And I just want to go over, first off, whether non-competes are legally applicable and what they're all about. So for those who don't know what a non-compete is simply a clause. It could be a large clause in a contract that says, if you leave my company, if you leave the employer, you cannot work for a competitor or within the industry for X amount of time. It's usually 1 year. That's like a standard, a 1 year non-compete. So if you leave,
or to be a radius or something like that. In the medical field, it's a lot of times like radius, like you can't work within 10 miles. And a lot of times that's so that if the company gets bought out, you can't just get hired by the new company or like if not bought out, but if the contract gets taken over by a different company, then you basically would have to stay with them because you couldn't get hired on by the new company in the same role at the same place.
Well, one good thing that I like about whether it's Biden or his administration or his people, he ran on a promise which should be completed by June of this year, a federal law that says non-competes are essentially banned. Because right now it's up to the states, and I'm all about states' rights, don't get me wrong. But when
I think everybody knows that, Naresh.
I'm all about individual states. The people aren't actually voting on this issue. I don't know of any state, actual people going out, voting in a referendum and saying, I love non-competes. Like, I love my non-compete. If you put it on a ballot, most people are going to vote against it. And they should put it on a ballot, or they should have some type of federal mandate that says, which they're working on, saying that non-competes are essentially banned. I did a lot of research into this because I've had to deal with non-competes throughout my career. I've talked to experts, and remote work and working from home, it changes the way non-competes are viewed. Because initially, like you said, when non-competes came out a long time ago, before there was even a tech industry, the idea was that if you were a factory worker and you left your job at a factory to go work at another factory down the street, the idea was to allow you to do that, but you would have to take a break because your employer, your factory that you work for, doesn't want you taking the trade secrets with you to the person across the street, doesn't want you taking the customers. Let's say you have your own book of clients or customers, they don't want you taking them across the street. That's why non-competes originally came out. And there's 6, we can quickly run through these, but there's 6 criteria. And if any one of the 6 is applicable, then the non-compete is essentially void. Now, there are some states like California, non-competes are not enforced there. By California state law, they decided as a state, hey, we can't do this, largely because when the tech industry took off in the 90s, people were leaving left and right, and they started working from home. The state of California realized, hey, if people want to leave jobs for higher paying jobs, they should be allowed to do that. They should be allowed to earn an honest living. I'll quickly run through these 6 things. I want to hear your thoughts on these 6, if they make sense, if you have any other thoughts. But the first thing is remote work. So if you're a remote worker, a non-compete is not applicable. Whether you're remote at a place that's down the street or you're remote for a company that's in another state. If you're a remote worker, and this is kind of common sense, it's your office is your home. What are you going to do? Steal something out of your home and take it to the next employer? That's the first thing. Number 2 is proximity. this ties in with remote work somewhat. A lot of these employers will have, oh, there's a 100-mile proximity where if you leave your job, you can't work for another place within 100 miles of it. If, let's say, for example, your employer is more than 100 miles away, that's generally the most that they'll enforce, 100 miles, especially if you live in another state. That's going to be number 3. But number 2 is proximity. If you live more than 100 miles away from your company's headquarters, then you're good. Non-compete cannot be enforced. Next, like I just mentioned, is another state. If your employer is in one state, they're incorporated in one state, and you work in another state, non-compete cannot be enforced. Sounds pretty common sense. Next is independent contractor. If you're an independent contractor, the word independent means you are independent. Yes, you can leave a client, because if you're an independent contractor, you now work for a client. You have a client. You would absolutely be allowed to leave that client and work with whatever clients you want. That's why you're called an independent contractor. And an employer can get in big trouble if they try to enforce a non-compete on an independent contractor, because then what could end up happening is, let's say an employer came after an independent contractor. An independent contractor's attorney can then say, oh, you're trying to treat my employee as a full-time worker. Therefore, you owe all this unemployment tax, unemployment insurance, back pay, healthcare, benefits. You owe all these things to the government and my client. That's another one. That's number 4. Number 5 is if you're fired or laid off. Generally, if you leave on your own volition, you have to follow the non-compete. But if you're fired or you're laid off, the government's going to side with the poor person who just lost their job. If you're really that important, you would have never gotten fired or laid off to begin with. If you're fired or laid off, you should be able to find good, honest work without worrying about a non-compete. The last 2, one is a low-paying job, and another is if you're a middle management or below position-wise. Let's say you're making $10 an hour and you lose your job, or you're making $10 an hour and you say, hey, I want to get this job that pays $15 an hour, and you get it. You can't have an employer. I mean, that's close to slavery. In fact,
yeah, they pretty much say these people don't have trade secrets. Like,
yeah.
Scanning groceries is not a trade secret.
It's not a trade. And the same thing with middle management or below. If you're a middle manager or below, if you're entry level, straight out of college kid, or entry level worker, or low level corporate job or management job, like a customer service rep, or even just a middle manager. If you're a product manager, not like a senior product man or a senior VP of product, you can leave and not worry about the non-compete. Again, why would they do this? Because people deserve to pursue their careers. They deserve to make more money if they're able to do it. This is the American dream. I'll quickly go through them again. If you're a remote worker, if your proximity, let's just say more than 100 miles, if you're in another state, if you're an independent contractor, if you're fired or laid off, if you're low paying, middle management or below. Even one of those things, a non-compete cannot be enforceable. Now, I do want to say this with this caveat: always consult an employment attorney regarding non-competes. I'm just telling you what I've learned through this process. If you have anything else to add, Adam, feel free to add it, but always consult with an attorney who can help you out with this. You're seeing fewer and fewer employers. It's rare that you hear about a friend of yours or a colleague who's like, oh, my former employer is coming after me for a non-compete. It's very rare. They have them there now just to scare
they're in there for scare tactics, but yeah, they don't come after you.
They're in there and people follow them. My wife, she has to sign all these non-competes for her work, and I showed her the FTC press release. I was like, look, show this to your employer. Like, the non-competes are going away. And she's like, no, I don't want to piss them off. Like, God. And that's what it is. People, they see the non-compete and it's not about the law anymore. It's just, I don't want to piss off my employer.
You mean former employer?
Or the former employer. Exactly. Any thoughts on this, Adam, before we sign off?
No, I'm just glad that it's finally coming to fruition, because we don't need to be protecting the big corporations from the big bad employee.
Someone at a dinner party got into a it wasn't even a debate when they were talking about non-competes, and I was like, yeah, I hate non-competes. And this person, her mom owns a private practice, and she was like, it's not right for employees to leave and start another practice. And I'm like, what? That's capitalism.
Then treat them better.
Yeah, that's why I said pay them more, treat them better. Sorry, like that's how life works. So anyway, if you have any thoughts on this, hello@workfromhomeshow.com, email us. Our website is workfromhomeshow.com. Follow us on social media. Leave us a review on whatever podcasting platform you use, Spotify, TuneIn, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts. We greatly appreciate all your support. We're going to be back with interviews. We got a lot of great interviews coming up. So until next week, keep on working from home.